Hello! I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the tarot deck that we are going to be using for the entire month of September. And that deck is the Goddess Tarot. So the Goddess Tarot is actually a tarot deck that I've had in my collection for a really long time. I've had this, I don't even know. Let's see what the book says is like the original date for it. Okay, so the original date for publication on this is 1999. I probably have had this deck since 99. I'm actually a little bit embarrassed to show the book, but here's the book, The Goddess Tarot, and it hopefully really, yeah, it's really easy to tell. Not all of my books in my collection look this bad. This one had an accident, and I couldn't part with it. So yeah, it's got some water damage and liquid damage, and I am a super bibliophile, so having a book in my collection that has water damage is really embarrassing. But it has been in my collection a long time. I do not do readings with this deck, typically. Upon request, this month in September, I will do a reading with this deck if you ask. But I don't typically do readings with this deck because look at the size of this deck. Look at how big it is compared to my hand. It's gigantic. It is so hard to shuffle this. You guys are going to see me all month screw up and drop this deck like 1,000 times just because they're so big. They're such a big deck of cards. They are absolutely gorgeous though. They are not a traditional deck. So much like the last month deck that we read from, had different names for the cards, and they were all kind of a little bit screwy. And if you didn't already know your major arcana numbers, it's going to be kind of loopy. You're not going to remember what each one is. You might rely a lot on the book and what it's got and that kind of thing. But I will say that I really have enjoyed these cards for two reasons. So reason number one that I've enjoyed these cards is because they are very goddess-centric. There are very few masculine cards in this deck, which is kind of cool because most decks lean a little more to the masculine. So it's kind of neat to have a deck that's very feminine. The other thing that I very commonly use this deck for is I do a red tent month pretty regularly. I used to do it every single month for like about 2 or 3 years. It was a really constant thing. And now with COVID and everything else going on, I just haven't done a whole lot of them, and I really want to get back into it. But this deck is what we would choose from for kind of our intention for the month. So everybody would get a chance, and I would really only pull the major arcana and the court cards out, and I would put them out, and everybody got to pick a card, and we would read from the book, and we would kind of go around and talk about what our intention is for the month. And I really like this deck for that purpose. So I use it a little bit more like an oracle deck rather than a traditional tarot deck. That said, I don't think it's a bad deck. It is very beautiful. You can see there's princesses instead of knights. There's the Queen of Cups right there. She's beautiful. There are kings. And there are princes. Those are the male energies in this deck. But as I'm going to show you, we've got the Star and Sarasvati and Estelathi, which please forgive my pronunciation of some of these goddesses. I'm not familiar with all of them. So even as long as I've had this deck, I'm not super familiar with all of them. So I really, really like this deck. It's also really bright. And very easy to read as far as like the images are very clear and the lettering and the words are very clear and there's not a whole lot of extra stuff going on this. So I like this deck. I think it's a lot of fun. I think we're going to have a great time in September playing with this deck. The book is really cool too because not only does it go into the meanings of the cards themselves, it talks a little bit about the mythology of each of the major goddesses that are represented in the deck. So if you are interested in goddess mythology and you've not like gotten into any of that recently, or you're like just stepping into goddess stuff, this is kind of cool because it kind of gets your feet wet without going, here's a whole bunch of information that is going to overwhelm you and you won't know where to start. The other book I totally recommend for just dipping your toes in goddess stuff and goddess mythology is Goddess 365, which is a really good book because every single day of the year has a different goddess that you kind of can do a little bit of research on. And if you're into the ritual of things, you can kind of do the rituals and stuff like that. So it's kind of neat. But this book is really fun for goddess mythology, as well as getting into kind of goddess lore and what the meanings are, and also getting into the tarot, because that's a lot of fun. So that's kind of my brief review on the deck that we're going to be playing with for the month of September and kind of the pros and cons of it. I don't currently know where to get the deck, but if I do find a neat place to get it, I will let you know. It is a US Games System printed deck, so check that out as a place to get it. These are written and illustrated by the same person, so that's a unique thing. This person did the whole deck by themselves. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to go do the video for our first card for the month. So super exciting. Happy September. Enjoy it. And let's get into some goddess stuff. Let's girls rock. Girls rock. All right.